Welcome to today's webinar, First Steps of Squirrel, bringing your spreadsheets to life. What are we going to cover today? Well, it's really very straightforward. What I want to do is to show you what I mean by bringing a spreadsheet to life and then showing you how easy Squirrel365 makes that to do. And so to show you how to bring a spreadsheet to life, here is an example that I have. Now I am still inside PowerPoint, so I've embedded this visualization here inside PowerPoint. But the interesting thing is this, what you see before you is at heart a spreadsheet. This was built on a spreadsheet, and we will look at the spreadsheet this was built on and how it was built in the section where we get into the Squirrel Designer and how you go about this. But not only is it a visualization of the spreadsheet, allows you to drive the logic in that spreadsheet, the model in that spreadsheet, the calculations in that spreadsheet. So what it is just a little model that I created about a fictitious software company and its revenue growth based on various factors about their online advertising, what their customer net promotion score is and will be in the future, what churn rates and conversion rates are. So for example, from here, if I say I want my churn rate to go up, well, I don't want it to go up, but if it did go up, what would happen? And we can see there that sort of the second year is coming down. Actually, if I pull that down there, we see the churn rate. As the churn rate goes up, my second year numbers fall off because the model says it's only after a year that people churn, so it's the second year that they churn there. If I up my advertising budget, we see that the revenue goes up in my year-on-year growth. I can do the same with a monthly subscription. I can get more revenue that way. So it's a fully interactive way of getting hold of the spreadsheet model, of presenting it in an engaging fashion and letting yourself, in this case, presenting, or if you deliver it to someone else, them, to use the model and to drive it using things like sliders and, as you see up here, sort of number inputs and various other components. And so we've taken a spreadsheet and turned it into something entirely different, which is now presentable and manageable. It's easy to share on a link. I don't have to expose the full model to anyone. They don't have to see how it all works. They just get the simplified version depending on what I want to expose to them. And so that's what we mean by bringing a spreadsheet to life. And so the only other thing to cover in the other 25 minutes here is how is it done? And so what we're going to do is we're going to take that spreadsheet that you just saw brought to life, bring it into Squirrel and show you exactly how you go about creating one of these from an ordinary spreadsheet. So if we come into the Squirrel Designer here, before I bring in the full spreadsheet that we're going to look at, I just want to introduce you to the Squirrel Designer, how it works, the areas that make it up, and do the most simple example to get across what is the most important facet of Squirrel. So what we have here is the white area at the top is the canvas on which you build the visualization, the front end of your spreadsheet. Down here, obviously, is the spreadsheet and an empty spreadsheet at the moment, and we'll do a simple one to start with and then read in the SaaS revenue one. Down here, I have all the components I can add to bring my spreadsheet to life. These charts, data visualizations, tables, various controls, of which we'll look at one or two today and more in these series of 3 webinars. Text controls, so I can display text or input text back into the model. Shapes for making things look nicer, images and icons, and then more sophisticated containers, which we'll actually start looking at in webinar 3 in this series. And so in order to put something onto the canvas, you just click on it here and say, I'm going to take a text label and I'll put it on my canvas. So that is now part of my project. And if I went to preview this, I can go and preview it. I now have a project that has a text label that says this is a text label on it. Not very interesting, but it's what we can do with that that makes it very interesting. So the first thing is I can change that text by typing it in like that, or and this is the key point, the point at which Squirrel really comes to life, or I can connect it into my spreadsheet. I can bind the value of what's being displayed in here into my spreadsheet. So in the very simple example, let's say I put a 10 in this cell A1, just like I would in any spreadsheet, type it in, and off you go. What I can now say is that the value or what's going to be displayed in this text is going to be whatever is in cell A1. So there it's 10. So now it's 10. Because that's what in the sheet. If I change that in the sheet, it's now 20 because it changed in the sheet. So it's a faithful representation of what's happening in the spreadsheet. So this area up here is showing me what's going on in the underlying spreadsheet. Now, obviously, when the user sees the output, as we saw in the PowerPoint presentation I was doing, they don't see any of the underlying spreadsheet. They just see the output. But then what we're going to do here is we're going to add a second component, and that's going to be a slider. And the slider is going to change the value in this cell. So you'll see that when I click on the text box, I get the properties for the text box. When I click on the slider, I get the properties for the slider. And in here, I can say, well, this value for the slider is going to come from here. So that's now 20 out of 100. Because I've got the sort of, I'm saying it's from 0 to 100. I'll make that in steps of 1. And now what I can do is, because these are connected through this cell, so this shows what's in this cell, this affects what's in this cell, then if I come to preview, then if I move this, you'll see that the text updates depending on what the slider is doing. And that's all happening through the spreadsheet. And it's not just single cells. So for example, if I said that was equal to that cell times 100, sorry, which is, again, totally standard spreadsheet Excel logic in here. It's just the same formula you would use whether you're Google Sheets or Excel or anything like that. And instead of binding this output, this text, to the 20, I'm going to bind it to the 2000. So now what happens is I'm changing the underlying value. It's going from 1 to 100, but this is multiplied by 10 and is being updated as I go. And as I say, this is the view that you would see if you were an end user of this project. I can go into what we call debug mode, where I see the project running, but I also see what's happening in the spreadsheet. And here you can see some of this sort of magic happening underneath. So as I move the slider, you can see that these two cells are moving in unison. So what's happening is the slider is linked to this cell, so it updates it. This cell then calculates from that. And then because this is linked to that, this displays the value of that calculation. There's a lot going on in the background, but it's really very straightforward. I just bind it to the model of my spreadsheet, and I can visualize it and affect it using input and output components from the component library over here. So that's the very simplest explanation of what Squirrel works. And actually, other than different components and different properties on those components, really that's about it. That's what there is to Squirrel. You've seen the magic, if you like, of how you can use Squirrel to bring your spreadsheets to life. So what I'm going to do is bring in, actually, first of all, I'm going to go to so this is the model that was based on, the one you saw in PowerPoint. It's just a 24-month forecast of revenue based on various factors, the factors that you saw in the Squirrel display of the model, and it's all very simple, straightforward Excel formulae, just like you would have in any spreadsheet you happen to be lying around. This adds up the years. This takes some values and formats them. This copies the one from the previous. This adds things together. It's all very straightforward. So I can take that spreadsheet, and if I import it into Squirrel, then now we see that same spreadsheet inside Squirrel. So you see it's here, it's there, is in Excel, and there is in Squirrel, exactly the same. And indeed, I can change it in Squirrel, as you saw me typing 10 and 20 into A1 in the previous one. So for example, in here, if I was to put 700 as the starting point here, then we see it's 856938, which is different from here. If I come into the factors and type 700 in there, then what we'll see is that's recalculated to give me the same numbers in here. So it's exactly the same calculations are happening inside Squirrel as are happening inside Excel. And so all the logic is taken through into Squirrel. Now, it's not a one-way street. So if I do make changes, we will do a little later on in here, then I can always say file export and put it back into Excel. So it's not like it's really as a companion product to Excel. So everything that you've got in Excel can stay in Excel, and we will work on that. But if you do make any changes inside Squirrel, you can update your original Excel model, or in fact, it's about XLSX file, so you could re-upload that back to Google Sheets or anything. So it's not like Squirrel is capturing the spreadsheet and somehow taking it captive. It's still free to be a spreadsheet, but it's also free to be part of this this new world of Squirrel and its interactive capabilities. So rather than just having a text and a slider as the rather boring example we saw earlier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a chart here, and that chart is going to visualize some of this revenue data. Now again, charts have got many more properties than the text and the slider we saw, but it's always the same principle. I could type in here and say revenue. I've spelled that wrongly, but actually what I'm going to do is, rather than type it in, I'm going to bind it into a cell in the spreadsheet, which is that title there. And so I've got recurring revenue there. I don't want a subtitle. Then I want to add in my data. And just as in Excel, because the data I want to chart, which is this recurring revenue, and the titles for it are separate, I'm going to bind those into the chart separately. And so this is going to be my revenue series, and the values are going to come from here. And I can do Control Shift right to highlight that whole row. And so now I've got my data in there. Make a little adjustment. I like auto sizing the bars to make it look a little nicer. But you'll see along the bottom I've got some generic dummy labels, so I'll just put those labels in there. Again, cursor keys to move around to get the data that I want, hit return, and I've got my basic chart. Now these are, read them, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my x-axis and do a little manipulation there. I move those at 45 degrees. I don't want the title at the bottom there, so I'll turn that off. And then for the y-axis, I'm going to again turn off the title, but also format these as format it as a currency. I'm going to make it dollars and put a separator in there, so we've got that all nicely formatted. So there I have my my chart. Looks suspiciously like the chart you saw in the finished model. That's because it is essentially the same chart, a little different colors. And so what I'm going to do now is add in a slider, just as I did in the most simple case. And I'm going to say that that slider is going to represent a percentage, and I'm going to bind it to the factor on the second sheet, which is monthly churn. And so that's all I need to do. I've done, and I've now gone preview this. What you can see is if I move this, then you'll see that the chart changes in the second year because the churn is kicking in as it gets more. Now, interestingly, one of the things, this has gone to a net revenue, which is clearly nonsense. You don't get negative revenues with high churn. You get stops at zero when everyone has disappeared, which actually suggests there's a flaw in my model. I'm just not surprised it was put together quite quickly. But I find this, even if you don't use Squirrel in order to present and as I say, bring your spreadsheets to life, actually wiring it up with a few sliders and some charts is a great way of stress testing a model just by seeing what happens to the data in it as you push values through the model. And so that classic example, shouldn't let revenue go negative, and that picks it up really quickly in here. But anyway, that's not the point of this particular presentation. So that's for churn. So what I might want to do is edit. No, actually, no, the churn here, I'm going to just make that go up in steps of 1. That makes it a little smoother rather than 5. And then I'm going to edit, copy, and edit, paste to give me a second one of those. And I'm just going to say that that is going to be my referral conversion rate there. So now I've got 2 sliders changing different things in the model. So the churn obviously brings it down, but the this brings it up. So I can get some nice sort of curves happening there as you go up and down. So a snake walking along the chart. And so now it's being driven by 2 different parameters. And as we saw in the very simple case, if I come back to my main mode, I go into debug mode, you can see that as I move this, if you look down at the numbers in the spreadsheet down here, they're moving as I change this. This whole thing is genuinely recalculating the model as it would do in Excel and taking the output and putting it into the chart here. So it's all based on the spreadsheet. There's no other way you can make this run other than using spreadsheet logic. So if you know spreadsheets, essentially you know about 95 to 99% of what Squirrel is all about, and the rest is really just drag and drop. As we say, you do it with clicks, not code. I mean, obviously you could write something like this with a whole bunch of code, but that's certainly not what I would be doing, and I suspect it's not what most of you guys would be doing. This is a quick and easy way to do this. But we can also, I want to make it look a little nicer, so we come in and I'm going to add a text label, and that text label is just going to be a title on here. So that's going to be the monthly churn. I might want to make it a little smaller, and make it a little smaller there, and format it to the left. And then again, I'm going to edit, copy, and edit, paste that, and bring that down to here. And that's going to be, that was this referral conversion rate as well. And then rather than put a slider, I want to also add another type of input, and that's the value input. And I'm going to use that to put in my ad spend. I don't want a slider on that. I'm just going to either type in or use the arrows to put that in, and I can style that. It's going to be a currency again. It's going to be US dollars, and it's going to have there. So I've now got a slider in there. But then I can take all of these. I'll spread them horizontally, line them up to the left, which makes them look a little nicer. Actually, maybe move that up a bit like that. So now I've got you can see how it's building up. So I won't go through all of these that we had in the finished model, but you'll see how that starts to do. I can sort of, oh yeah, no, that's only going up by 1. I think we should probably have that going up by come in here. and the step size is 1,000. So that makes it better. So now it's going up by 1,000. There we go. That's better. So it makes a difference there. Again, we can do all of that. We might want to add a table in here. So as I can see this data as a table as well, and that's really easy to do. So if I just make some more space on the canvas, I come in here, bind it into this set of data that we have in the spreadsheet. Again, I added nothing to the spreadsheet. It's just as it was, and showing that there. So now we have a little table. Maybe make that component there like that. So now if I preview this, you'll see that as I move this, not only did the graph change, but all the numbers in the table, so I can see the details in there. And finally, there was one other thing that we saw on the finished model, and that was sort of like a KPI. So these KPIs here, and that comes from a data visualization, which is the metric tile. Value for the metric tile is going to come from here. It's showing as 1 because it's not yet formatted as a percentage. Let's make that like that. You can have all sorts of these trend icons, happy faces, sad faces, depending on where it's going, but I'm going to turn that and the subtitle off. It's just in there. And then the title here is going to be just what we said here, year-on-year revenue growth. So now I have a little thing, and again, that's as soon as I plumb it in, I can see what it changes. But we're going to format this in a way to make it look a little nicer and to make it interactive formatting. So I'm actually going to make the background of this, let's put the trend icon away. The background of this is going to be black, so black like that. And then to make it more visible, I'll make the value white, and also the title white too. So now we've got that, but I want to go one step further than that because we've got some targets in our sheets. And what I want to do is give it a color depending on whether you're above or under target. So I'm going to add into my sheet. Now you notice this is the first time I've added anything to my sheet, and you will find that as you get more into Squirrel, you'll start adding things that support Squirrel as well as the logic in your model. But that's a great thing to do because it gives you more capability at your fingertips using the same skills as you were before. Should it be color with a U or no? I'll in deference to our US audience there, I'll do there. So now what I'm going to do is a simple Excel formula, which is if the growth is less than the target, then I want red, otherwise green. I mean, that is genuinely just, I mean, that would work in Excel. It would just say red or green depending on what's in that thing there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this value, and rather than make it white, I'm going to bind it to the color in that cell. So now it's red because it's below target. So if I now come and preview this, then what you see is that as I move this up, when it gets to 80, it goes green. If I move the churn up, it'll go back down, so it goes to red, and I come up here. So I've got a way of highlighting when things are good or bad. We might want to shout a bit more about it, so I could always go back and say, no, I'm going to remove that binding from here and put it there, and I'm going to put the binding actually on the backdrop of the thing itself. And now we've got this going green and then going red and going green again. So you can see that's how these are built. So almost every square, if you go and look at our gallery online and things, that's how every Squirrel project is built. You've seen really all there is to it. So if I now open the full one, so I'm now, this is the one that you saw earlier. It's the same model, same with everything that we had in there before. I've just added more of these. I've added a background that makes it for little stop these lines and a few extra numbers, but essentially it is exactly the same as we had in the one that we just built, only a few more components, a little more thought through. Nothing has been done here other than adding Squirrel components, whether they be rectangles, lines, sliders, metric tiles, charts, and tables. That's it. And so what we can do with this now is we can publish it. We've got one-click publishing to make it available in all the ways I talked about earlier. So I'm going to publish up to the Squirrel Cloud, and I'm going to call this webinar SaaS. So I publish that away. That's generating it, publish it. That is now up in our Squirrel Cloud. You can see here, that's the one, that's actually the one that you saw embedded into the presentation earlier. This is the new one, webinar SaaS, that I just published. And you see this one's got the little icon here that means it's live, and this one doesn't. So I need to make this live. And there, so you've got that up there. So now I can maybe just open it in a browser. So if I bring that browser window in, you'll see, hey presto, it's opened up, and everything that we could do before is now live in a browser. But we've also got other sharing options here. So when I come to share, so that link, I can copy that web link, which is just the same as the one that was in the browser, and I can send that to anyone, and they could click on that, and then they could see this model and interact with it. You can put passwords on and things like that to make sure that people who shouldn't see it don't see it. But in principle, anyone with this link, if it's not password protected, can see it, so it's easy to distribute. You can also embed it in a website, say like WordPress or something like that. And this is the snippet of HTML that you would need to do that. So that's provided there. But you can also, as you saw earlier, embed it in PowerPoint. And so if I take, this is the PowerPoint ID, if I copy that and I now bring up an empty PowerPoint presentation, then what I can do is I can say, I want to insert, and you'll see if I've got it here because I've done it earlier, but I could go into here, go to the Microsoft add-in store, search for Squirrel365, and that's there. I can add that now. It's free to add. It's a free add-on to PowerPoint, and you've got it. When you've got it there, it'll appear in your list of add-ins, and then I've got it in here. All I do is paste in that identifier that we had earlier, and hey presto, I have this now running live in PowerPoint. And so I can do all the things I can do here. I can move these and change that. So anything you can do, and also if I go and build this like that, then here it is in PowerPoint as well. So it's running both in design mode and in presentation mode, and so it's you can put it as a seamless part of your presentations, as you saw me do earlier on when I started the presentation. But there are other places that we can embed it easily, as well as being able to get this embed code to do it sort of as with a fragment of HTML. If I copy this web link, there are various places that I can put this. So for example, if I come into here, this is Notion. And many of you use Notion for collaboration and things like this. This is one that I did before, so it's a slightly different Squirrel model. But what we're going to do is add a new page here, webinar SaaS, hit return, paste in my thing, and say I'm going to create an embed, and then hey presto, just with that link, I now have this sitting here inside my Notion environment. I can do all the things I did before. So one click, or copy paste the link, and then here you have it inside the Notion environment. I can share that. I know some people create their website using Notion, and you can do all of that in there. I can also embed it into the Teams environment. So here inside Teams, and I can add a little page into Teams, and to add a website again, sort of the webinar SaaS, and I'll just paste that link in there. And having done that, then hey presto, I've got the same thing sitting inside Teams, so I can collaborate it inside Teams. And the last place we're going to look at is Medium. So I've got a Medium account where I publish some stories, and I can, if I write a new story here, in exactly the same way as I did in Notion, I can just type this in, paste my link, and hey presto, I've got in here. Now that's because it's not shrinking to fit, but I can fix that very easily if I come back to Squirrel here. And so I can just republish that same dashboard, that same project, but this time with scaling on. Let's just updated that link. So and that's a really nice way of seeing that sort of if you've got a link out there and you want to make a change, you can publish it without changing the link. So if I come here, just take that off and then repost the same link, then this time it will, there we go, it's now. And again, in Medium, it doesn't, it's not live in the design phase. You have to actually publish it. I won't publish this, there's not much to it, but you can see here on Medium, for example, I've got my 6 published stories, and so maybe you can come to this one and you'll see that when I'm here, there's my Medium story comes in, and I can, this is the one that explains how the COVID infection rate, the R factor, makes a difference to the number of infections. Anyway, that's there. So that's how it's done. Your spreadsheets with clicks not code. It couldn't be any easier, and it builds on the skills you already have, the spreadsheets you already have. You can start from scratch in the spreadsheet, in your spreadsheet, create a new one entirely inside Squirrel, or you can create it in Excel or Google Sheets, or you can just take ones that you already have. They're all compatible with Squirrel. If you want to do that and see it for yourself, then you're more than welcome. We encourage you to get your free Squirrel account. If you just go to squirrel365.io/get that will give you unlimited personal projects and one shared project. And for it to appear in something like PowerPoint or on the web, it has to be shared. But you can change what is your shared project. So if you have 5 or 6 and you want to put one in a PowerPoint one day and a different one in a PowerPoint the next day, you just make one live and you put it back into drafts, and then you take the next one and make it live. Or of course, over and above the free one, you can get also versions with more shared projects that you can use in order to share with other people, whether it be online, in Teams, in PowerPoint, or whatever. So that's webinar part 1, bringing your spreadsheets to life, making these incredible interactive projects with your spreadsheets and your spreadsheet knowledge. That was the first part of Squirrel. And actually, one of the things I said in when I posted about this this webinar is we want to we're exhibiting at the Global Excel Summit in a couple of weeks' time, and we have some tickets. And if you want to try and win a ticket from us, then sign up the free account, as I said before, create a project based on one of your spreadsheets, share it on Twitter or LinkedIn with those tags there, so tag Squirrel in there, and on the 4th of February, we'll have a look through them, and the best one will win a ticket. I think it's about £150, $210 worth of ticket price, and it's a great lineup. I mean, the Global Excel Summit, we were there last year. There's some huge, amazing content. So if you're into Excel and spreadsheets and things like that, there's some great stuff there. It takes you maybe 10 minutes if you've got an existing spreadsheet, and you're in a chance to win. And then part 2 in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll send an invite to everybody on the call, digging a little deeper into Squirrel, adding an intelligent interface to your spreadsheet. And to give you an idea of what that means, here are these are 2 spreadsheets with a Squirrel front end embedded in my PowerPoint. And here what I can do is I've got drop downs to change things, and with the sliders and spinners that we had before. I can also make changes using a radio button. So that's one level of adding extra UI into your projects. Here's one where we did a little mock-up of the Amazon Lambda calculator, so you can change that, where you are, how much you want to use it, how many requests per month. But then the interesting thing about interfaces, I can checkbox that changes whether I use the free tier. I can switch bits of I can switch in and out. I can see the details or see only the top one. This one's quite nice. It's got a little help text on here. There. So if you want to come and see how you can add that extra layer on top of your Squirrel projects, then we'll send out an invite, and you come to the second webinar, which is digging deeper into Squirrel and intelligent interface to your spreadsheet. Anyway, we're so I will bring this to a close. Thank you so much for being with us. As I say, the recording will be sent out, and feel free to share it with your colleagues. And if you have any other questions, my email is donald@squirrel365.io. You're more than welcome to email me, and we can take things offline. So with that, we will close down, and thank you very much.